Tick-tock, the clock is running in Hickory House, a 1955 London hostel teeming with secrets. When petty thefts, a rucksack, a scarf, a diamond ring turn deadly, with a student's murder under a yew tree, Hercule Poirot steps in. His sharp mind unravels a chilling web of smuggling, where stolen trinkets hide uncut diamonds and a killer lurks among the students. As the grandfather clock chimes, Poirot races to catch the mouse before it strikes again. Will he expose the truth, or will the shadows of Hickory House claim another victim? Chapter 1. The clock strikes trouble. The pale April sun of 1955 filtered through the grimy windows of Hickory House, a rambling student hostel tucked in a quiet corner of London's Bloomsbury. Its faded Georgian facade, once grand, now bore the wear of years and the clamor of youthful occupants from every corner of the globe. Within its walls, a peculiar malaise had taken root, one that had drawn the attention of Hercule Poirot, the celebrated Belgian detective, whose fastidious nature and impeccable mustache were as renowned as his deductive prowess. Poirot sat in the cramped, dimly lit office of Mrs. Maria Nicoletis, the hostel's proprietress, whose robust frame and sharp Greek features suggested a woman not easily cowed. Yet her dark eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as she leaned across her cluttered desk, her voice a blend of indignation and urgency. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her accent thickening with emotion, "it is intolerable. Thefts, Betty, foolish thefts have plagued my house for weeks. My students, they whisper and accuse one another. I cannot have this discord under my roof." Poirot's small, precise hands adjusted the brim of his hat, which rested on the desk beside a chipped teacup and a pile of unopened letters. His gray eyes, sharp as a hawk's, surveyed the room, papers strewn haphazardly, a faint aroma of anise from an open bottle of ouzo, and a heavy brass paperweight shaped like a lion, which seemed to glare at him with mute disapproval. "Madame," he said, his voice calm yet incisive, "you speak of thefts. Pray, describe them to me. Leave nothing out, for in the smallest detail lies the spark of truth." Mrs. Nicoletis threw up her hands, her bangles clinking. "It began with trifles: a rucksack from one boy, a silk scarf from a girl, a pair of gloves, even a stethoscope. Then, last week, a diamond ring was taken from Celia Austin, a quiet girl, a pharmacy student. A diamond, Monsieur Poirot, not some bauble, but a thing of value. The students are restless, pointing fingers. I fear what this will do to my reputation." Poirot's mustache quivered slightly, a sign of his mind at work. "These students, they are from many lands, and the items stolen, they belong to different individuals." Yes, Mrs. Nicoletis replied, waving a hand as if to dismiss the complexity. "From India, Nigeria, France, America, bright young minds, but careless, always leaving things about. I thought them honest, but now—" Her voice trailed off, and she fixed Poirot with a pleading look. "Honesty, Madame, is not always what it seems," Poirot said, rising from his chair with the grace of a man who valued precision in all things. "I shall require a list of every resident, their studies, their habits, and the items they have lost. I must also have access to the hostel, every room, every corner. Order and method, they will guide us to the truth." Mrs. Nicoletis nodded, scribbling a note to her assistant. "You shall have it, monsieur, but be discreet. These young people, they are like cat-skittish and quick to claw." As Poirot stepped into the corridor, the heavy tick-tock of an ancient grandfather clock filled the air, its pendulum swinging with solemn regularity. The sound stirred a memory of a nursery rhyme: "Hickory Dickory Dock, the mouse ran up the clock." He paused, his eyes narrowing. A mouse indeed, he thought. But what kind of mouse scurries through Hickory House, stealing trifles and treasures alike? With a final glance at the clock, its hands pointing to noon, Poirot set forth to unravel the mystery, his little gray cells already humming with anticipation. Chapter 2. The residents of Hickory House. The morning after Hercule Poirot's arrival at Hickory House, the hostel hummed with the restless energy of its young occupants, their voices mingling in a cacophony of accents and languages that echoed through the narrow corridors. The air carried the faint scent of burnt toast from the communal kitchen, where students jostled over a battered kettle and a dwindling supply of marmalade. Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit and polished shoes, stood at the edge of the common room, his small stature belying the commanding presence that drew every eye. His mustache, waxed to perfection, gleamed under the flickering fluorescent light, and his sharp gray eyes scanned the room with the precision of a watchmaker examining a delicate mechanism. Hickory House was a microcosm of the world, its residents, a tapestry of cultures and ambitions, united by the pursuit of knowledge and the constraints of modest means. Poirot had requested a gathering of the students, and Mrs. Nicoletis, with her usual theatrical flair, had ensured their compliance, herding them into the common room like a shepherd corralling an unruly flock. The room itself was a study in contrasts. Faded velvet curtains hung alongside posters of jazz musicians and political slogans, while mismatched furniture bore the scars of countless occupants. A heavy oak table, scarred with initials and coffee rings, dominated the space, surrounded by chairs that creaked under the weight of their occupants' unease. Poirot cleared his throat, a sound as deliberate as a conductor's baton. "Madame, et messieurs," he began, his voice carrying the soft lilt of his Belgian heritage. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I am here to address the disturbances that have plagued this house. Thefts, they are not merely inconveniences, but threads in a larger web. I ask for your cooperation, your honesty. Tell me of your losses, your observations, and together we shall restore order." The students exchanged glances, some wary, others curious. Poirot's reputation preceded him, whispered in hushed tones by those who read the papers. But his presence in their midst felt incongruous, like a rare bird alighting in a crowded barnyard. He produced a small leather notebook, its pages crisp and expectant, and a silver pencil that gleamed as he poised it to write. First to speak was Celia Austin, the pharmacy student whose diamond ring had sparked Mrs. Nicoletis's summons. She was a slight girl, no more than 20, with mousy hair pinned haphazardly and eyes that darted nervously behind thick spectacles. "It was my ring," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A diamond, heart-shaped, set in gold. It was a gift. I kept it in a velvet box in my drawer, locked, but 2 weeks ago, it was gone." Her fingers twisted a handkerchief, and Poirot noted the faint tremor in her hands. "I didn't tell anyone at first. I thought I'd misplaced it, but then, other things started disappearing." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And this ring, mademoiselle, it was of great value. Sentimental, perhaps?" Celia flushed, her pale cheeks blooming pink. "Yes, very high. I don't like to talk about it." Her reticence was palpable, and Poirot made a mental note to probe further, gently, in private. Next was Nigel Chapman, a chemistry student whose lanky frame and tousled blonde hair gave him the air of a mischievous schoolboy, though his eyes held a glint of defiance. He sprawled in his chair, one leg slung over the armrest, and spoke with a drawl that bordered on insolence. "My rucksack went missing last month," he said. "Nothing fancy, just a canvas thing I used for books. Found it a week later in the laundry room, but my lighter was gone from the pocket, a silver one, engraved. Bit of a nuisance, but I reckon someone's just playing pranks." He grinned, but the smile didn't reach his eyes, and Poirot detected a flicker of unease beneath the bravado. Valerie Habus, a fashion student with the poise of a model, spoke next. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her tailored blouse suggested a taste beyond a student's budget. "My silk scarf," she said, her voice cool and measured. blue with a pattern of peonies. It was draped over my chair in the library, and then it was gone. I found it later, crumpled in a corner of the hall, but it was ruin-stained with ink. Her lips tightened, and Poirot sensed a controlled anger, as if the theft were a personal affront. Chandra Lal, a mathematics student from India, adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles and spoke softly, his accent precise. My spectacles were taken from my desk 3 weeks ago. I have another pair, but they are not as good. They reappeared in the common room, but the lenses are scratched, useless now. His brow furrowed, and Poirot noted his earnestness. The quiet frustration of a man who valued precision as much as he did. Jean Tomlinson, a biology student with a prim demeanor and tightly pinned curls, clutched a notebook to her chest. "My stethoscope," she said, her voice sharp with indignation. "I need it for my studies, and it was taken from my room. It's medical equipment, not a toy. Whoever took it is utterly irresponsible." Her eyes flashed, and Poirot wondered if her outrage masked something deeper. Sally Finch, an American studying literature, offered a warm smile that contrasted with the room's tension. Her red hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and her freckled face radiated an easy charm. "My gloves," she said, shrugging. "Leather, brown, nothing special. I left them on the hall table, and they vanished. Haven't seen them since. It's odd, but I figured someone borrowed them." Her nonchalance seemed genuine, but Poirot noted her quick glance at Nigel, as if gauging his reaction. Colin McNabb, a psychology student with a lean face and piercing blue eyes, leaned forward, his notebook open as if he were studying his peers rather than addressing Poirot. "I lost a pen," he said, his Scottish burr adding a clipped edge to his words. "Fountain pen, black, a gift from my father. It was in my coat pocket, and then it wasn't. Turned up in the kitchen, but the nib was bent." He fixed Nigel with a stare, and Poirot caught the undercurrent of accusation. Akibumbo, a Nigerian anthropology student, spoke last, his cheerful demeanor undimmed by the thefts. "My lipstick," he said, grinning broadly. "Not mine, of course. For my cousin, a gift. I left it in my bag, and poof, gone. It came back, but the case was cracked." His laughter filled the room, but Poirot noted the slight tension in it. His posture, as if he were more affected than he let on. Poirot closed his notebook with a deliberate snap. "Merci, all of you. These losses, they seem random, yet I suspect they are not. I shall need to know your movements, your habits. Who was where when these items vanished? The truth, it hides in the details." The students murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Poirot's gaze lingered on each face, cataloging expressions: Celia's anxiety, Nigel's defiance, Valerie's reserve, Chandra's unease, Jean's indignation, Sally's warmth, Colin's scrutiny, Akiba's cheer. Each was a piece of the puzzle, and Poirot's little gray cells buzzed with the challenge of fitting them together. As the meeting dispersed, Poirot lingered in the common room, his attention drawn to a bulletin board plastered with notices: lecture schedules, a flyer for a jazz club, a handwritten note seeking a study partner. He approached, noting a faint mark on the board's edge, a smudge of ink, blue and fresh. He recalled Valerie's scarf, stained with ink. A coincidence? Poirot did not believe in coincidences. He moved to the hallway, where the grandfather clock stood sentinel, its pendulum swinging with metronomic precision. The rhyme echoed in his mind: "Hickory Dickory Dock." The mouse ran up the clock. He examined the clock, its dark wood polished but scratched, as if something had been dragged across it. His fingers traced the marks, and he frowned. "A mouse, perhaps," he murmured, "but one with a purpose." Returning to Mrs. Nicoletus's office, he requested the list of residents and their schedules. She handed him a typed sheet, her handwriting scrawled in the margins with notes about rents and complaints. "They are good students," she said, her tone softer now, "but young, impulsive. You will find the thief, monsieur." "I shall find more than a thief," Madame Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "For where there is theft, there is motive, and motive is the key to the human heart." As he left the office, he overheard a heated exchange in the corridor. Nigel's voice, sharp and mocking, cut through the air. "You're too serious, McNab. Always analyzing like we're rats in your lab." Colin's reply was cold. "And you're too careless, Chapman. One day, your jokes will catch up with you." Poirot paused, unseen, his mind noting the tension. Nigel's pranks, Colin's scrutiny, were they mere personality clashes, or something more? He resolved to observe them closely, for in their words lay clues, like breadcrumbs scattered on a forest path. That afternoon, Poirot began his inspections, starting with Celia's room. It was small, tidy, with a narrow bed and a desk piled with pharmacology texts. The drawer where her ring had been kept was locked, but the lock was simple, easily picked by a practiced hand. He examined it, noting faint scratches around the keyhole. "A skilled thief," he mused, "or one who knows this house well." Next, he visited the common areas, the kitchen, where pots clattered and students argued over whose turn it was to wash up, the library, a cramped room with sagging shelves, and the basement, where laundry machines hummed and a faint dampness clung to the air. In each space, he sought patterns, anomalies. A discarded cigarette butt in the library, a brand. Nigel smoked. A torn page from a medical journal in the kitchen, perhaps genes. A faint chemical smell in the basement. Too subtle to identify, but enough to pique his curiosity as evening fell. Poirot returned to the common room where the students had gathered for tea. Sally strummed a guitar, her voice soft and lilting, while Chandra and Akiyambo played chess, their laughter punctuating the moves. Valerie sat apart, sketching in a notebook, her eyes flicking up occasionally to watch the others. Nigel lounged near Celia, teasing her about her missing ring. "Maybe it's with your secret admirer," he said, winking. Celia's face reddened, and she fled the room. Poirot followed, catching her in the hallway. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "you are troubled. If there is something you know, something you fear, you must tell Poirot. The truth, it protects as well as it reveals." Celia's eyes brimmed with tears. "It's nothing," she whispered. "Just personal things. The ring was a gift, that's all." She hurried away, leaving Poirot with more questions than answers. Back in the common room, he overheard Jean muttering to Colin. "Celia's hiding something," she said. "She's always been odd, mooning over that ring." Colin nodded, scribbling in his notebook, and Poirot wondered what theories the psychology student was forming. As night settled over Hickory House, Poirot sat in his temporary quarters, a small guest room with a creaking bed and a single window overlooking the garden. He reviewed his notes, the list of stolen items a curious mix, a rucksack, a scarf, gloves, a stethoscope, spectacles, a pen, a lipstick, and the diamond ring. Why such variety? Why return some items but not others? The ring, he sensed, was the key, its value an anomaly among the trifles. He leaned back, his fingers steepled, and closed his eyes. The clock's chime drifted through the walls, a steady tick-tock that seemed to mock the chaos of the case. Hickory Dickory Dock, he thought. The mouse was running, but Poirot would find it, for no puzzle could elude the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 3. The Shadow of Suspicion, the dawn of the third day at Hickory. House broke with a drizzle that cloaked London in a grey veil, mirroring the unease that had settled over the hostel's inhabitants. Hercule Poirot, ever punctual, sat at a small table in his temporary quarters, sipping a tisane prepared to his exact specifications chamomile, steeped for precisely 3 minutes, with a single drop of honey. His notebook lay open before him, its pages filled with meticulous notes on the residents and their stolen items, each entry a piece of the intricate mosaic he was determined to assemble. The thefts, he mused, were not mere acts of mischief but a deliberate pattern, though their purpose remained elusive, like a melody half heard in a dream. Poirot's morning began with a visit from Miss Felicity Lemon, his secretary, whose efficiency was matched only by her disapproval of disorder. She arrived promptly at 8, her sensible shoes clicking on the hostel's worn parquet floor, a leather satchel clutched under her arm. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice crisp as a freshly pressed sheet, "I have compiled the timeline you requested, cross-referencing the thefts with the students' schedules. It is incomplete, as some were vague about their whereabouts, but I trust it will suffice." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he took the neatly typed sheets, each column aligned with a precision that soothed his orderly soul. "Magnifique, Miss Lemon," he said, scanning the document. "You are a marvel. Now, let us see what secrets this timeline reveals." The list detailed the thefts: Celia Austin's diamond ring, taken 2 weeks prior; Nigel Chapman's rucksack and lighter stolen a month ago. The rucksack later returned. Valerie Hobbes's silk scarf, taken 3 weeks ago, found ink-stained. Chandra Lal's spectacles, missing for 2 weeks, returned scratched. Jean Tomlinson's stethoscope, gone 10 days, still missing. Sally Finch's gloves, vanished a fortnight ago, unrecovered. Colin McNabb's fountain pen, taken last week, returned damaged. And Akibombo's lipstick, a gift for his cousin, stolen and returned cracked. The timeline showed overlaps: most thefts occurred in the evenings, when the common room was crowded, or during early mornings, when students rushed to lectures. Poirot tapped a finger on the page. "Curio," he murmured. "The items, they are returned in some cases, but altered, stained, scratched, broken. Why? To distract, to conceal. And the ring, it stands apart, its value, a beacon in this fog of trifles." Miss Lemon adjusted her glasses. "Shall I investigate further, monsieur? Perhaps the pawn shops, to see if the ring has surfaced?" "An excellent thought, Miss Lemon. But first I must probe the human element. The heart, it speaks louder than the ledger." Leaving Miss Lemon to her tasks, Poirot ventured into the hostel's common areas, his polished shoes silent on the threadbare rugs. The common room was quieter now, the students subdued by the weight of suspicion. He found Sally Finch curled in an armchair, a dog-eared copy of Middlemarch in her lap. Her red hair caught the light, and her smile, though warm, was tinged with weariness. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, setting the book aside, "any luck finding my gloves? I'm starting to think they've run off to America without me." Poirot chuckled, a rare sound that softened his formal demeanor. "Mademoiselle Finch, your gloves, they are but one thread in this tapestry. Tell me, what do you observe of your fellow residents? The little tensions, the whispers." Sally hesitated, her fingers tracing the book's spine. "Well, it's a mixed bunch here. Nigel's always stirring things up, teasing everyone, especially Celia. She's sweet, but awfully shy, gets flustered easily. Valerie keeps to herself, like she's got secrets she's guarding. Chandra's quiet, always studying, and June, well, she's a bit of a stickler, always on about rules. Colin's the one to watch, though he's always scribbling in that notebook, analyzing us like we're his experiment." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And Monsieur McNabb, he observes you all closely." "Too closely," Sally said, lowering her voice. "He's studying psychology, you know. Thinks he can read our minds. It's unnerving." Poirot thanked her and moved on, his mind cataloging her words. Colin's scrutiny intrigued him. A student of the mind might see more than he shared. He sought out Colin next, finding him in the library, a cramped room lined with sagging shelves and the faint musty scent of old books. Colin sat at a table, his fountain pen scratching across a notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Monsieur McNab," Poirot said, settling into a chair opposite, "you are a student of human behavior. What do you make of these thefts?" Colin looked up, his blue eyes sharp and assessing. "They're not random," he said bluntly, his Scottish burr lending weight to his words. "Someone's testing us, seeing how we react. The items cheap stuff mostly, except that ring seemed chosen to provoke. Nigel's the obvious suspect. He's got a knack for trouble. But it's too obvious, don't you think? Like he's being set up." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You suspect a deeper game, then?" Colin shrugged, closing his notebook. "People hide things, Monsieur Poirot. Motives, feelings, secrets. I'd wager the thief's hiding more than stolen goods." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Poirot emerged to find Nigel Chapman and Jean Tomlinson in a heated exchange, their voices rising over the clatter of a dropped tray. "You're a menace, Nigel," Jean snapped, her face flushed. "Always playing your stupid pranks, leaving chaos everywhere." Nigel grinned, unrepentant. "Lighten up, Jean. Maybe your stethoscope's just listening to someone else's heartbeat now." Jean's eyes flashed, and she stormed off, leaving a trail of muttered indignation. Poirot approached Nigel, who leaned against the wall, lighting a cigarette with a flourish. "Monsieur Chapman," Poirot said, his tone mild but probing, "your jests, they seem to unsettle your peers. Tell me, where were you when Mademoiselle Austen's ring was taken?" Nigel exhaled a plume of smoke, his grin fading. "In my room probably. Studying, or maybe at the pub. Can't recall exactly. Look, I'm no thief, if that's what you're thinking. I pull pranks, sure, but I don't pinch things." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "And yet, your lighter was taken from your rucksack. A coincidence, perhaps." Nigel shrugged, but his nonchalance seemed forced. "Maybe someone's got it in for me. Ask Colin, he's always watching. Probably knows more than he lets on." As Nigel sauntered away, Poirot's thoughts turned to the ring. Its value set it apart, suggesting a motive beyond mere mischief. He sought out Celia Austen, finding her in the garden, a small patch of grass and roses hemmed by a low stone wall. She sat on a bench, her hands clasped tightly, her spectacles slipping down her nose. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, settling beside her, "your ring. It was precious to you, not only for its worth but for its meaning. You must tell Poirot who gave it to you, for this may unlock the mystery." Celia's lips trembled, and she looked away, her eyes fixed on a wilting rose. "It was a gift," she said softly, "from someone I cared for. I don't want to say more. It's private." Poirot nodded, sensing her fear. "Privacy. It is a shield, but sometimes it hides the truth from those who would help. If you change your mind, I am here." As he rose, a shadow moved near the garden gate, a figure, too quick to identify, slipping into the hostel. Poirot's instincts sharpened. Was someone watching, listening? He made a mental note to inspect the garden later, for secrets often lingered in overlooked places. That afternoon, Inspector Sharp arrived, his broad shoulders filling the doorway of Mrs. Nicoletta's office. His face, weathered by years of policing, bore a mix of skepticism and respect as he greeted Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot, Mrs. Nicoletta's says you're digging into these thefts. Small potatoes, if you ask me, but I'm happy to lend a hand if you need the yards, resources." "Merci, Inspector," Poirot replied, his tone courteous but firm. "These thefts, they are but the surface of a deeper current. I suspect a connection, a purpose, that eludes us still. May I ask you to check the backgrounds of the residents? Discreetly, of course." Sharp nodded, jotting a note. "I'll see what I can dig up." Any names in particular? All of them, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. But pay close attention to Monsieur Chapman and Mademoiselle Habos. Their alibis, they are flexible. As Sharp departed, Poirot returned to the common room, where Valerie Habos sat alone, her fashion sketches spread before her. Her elegance was striking, but her eyes held a guarded quality, like a door locked against intruders. Mademoiselle, Poirot said, "Your scarf, it was returned, but damaged. Have you enemies here, perhaps?" Valerie's pen paused, and she met his gaze. "Enemies? No, Monsieur Poirot. I keep to myself. The scarf was a nuisance, nothing more. I've had worse losses." Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened on the pen, a telltale sign of tension. Poirot pressed gently. "And your movements, on the evening it was taken? You were in the library, yes, I think so," she said, her eyes flickering. "I move around a lot. It's hard to keep track." Poirot smiled, but his mind was alert. Vague alibis, guarded responses, these were the threads he would weave together. As he left the common room, the grandfather clock chimed 3, its notes solemn and deliberate. Hickory Dickory Dock, he thought. The mouse was still running. But Poirot was closing in, his little gray cells weaving a net to catch it. Chapter 4. A deadly turn. The drizzle of the previous day had given way to a biting wind that swept through the streets of Bloomsbury, rattling the windows of Hickory House and deepening the unease within its walls. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the chill, sat in the hostel's library, a cramped sanctuary of sagging bookshelves and the faint scent of mildew. His small, precise hands turned the pages of his notebook, where the timeline of thefts, so meticulously compiled by Miss Lemon, lay like a map to a hidden treasure. Yet the map was incomplete, its contours blurred by the residents' evasions and the peculiar nature of the stolen items. The diamond ring, Poirot mused, was the lodestar, its brilliance casting light on a darker purpose. As evening descended, the hostel's usual clamor was subdued, the students moving with the wariness of those who sensed a storm approaching. Poirot had spent the day observing, questioning, his gray eyes missing nothing, the flicker of guilt in Nigel Chapman's grin, the guarded poise of Valerie Hobhouse, the nervous tremor in Celia Austen's voice. Each interaction added a thread to the tapestry he was weaving, but the pattern remained elusive, like a shadow glimpsed in fog. At precisely 8 o'clock, a scream shattered the quiet, high and piercing, cutting through the hostel like a blade. Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his cane tapping a rapid rhythm as he followed the sound to the garden. The other residents poured from their rooms, their voices a jumble of alarm and confusion. In the dim glow of a single lantern, Poirot found Jean Tomlinson, the biology student, slumped beneath a gnarled yew tree, her body unnaturally still. Her prim curls were disheveled, her face pale as moonlight, and beside her lay a syringe, its needle glinting with a sinister promise. Mrs. Nicoletis, arriving breathless and disheveled, clutched her shawl and wailed, "Mon Dieu, what is this? Jean, my poor girl." The students crowded around, their faces a gallery of shock and fear. Celia's eyes wide behind her spectacles, Nigel's usual smirk, gone. Valerie's lips pressed tight, Sally Finch's hand covering her mouth, Chandra Lal's hands trembling. Colin McNabb's gaze, sharp and calculating, Akibombo's cheerful demeanor extinguished. Poirot knelt beside the body, his movements precise, despite the urgency. He examined Jean without touching her, noting the faint bluish tint to her lips and the unnatural rigidity of her limbs. "Do not approach," he commanded, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "This is a matter for the police." Inspector Sharp, summoned by a frantic call from Mrs. Nicoletis, arrived within the hour, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silent garden. His weathered face was grim as he surveyed the scene, his men cordoning off the area with practiced efficiency. Poison, likely, he said, crouching beside Poirot. That syringe, it's to clean, almost staged. Morphine, I'd wager, given her medical studies. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Oui, Inspector, but the syringe, it is too perfect. Nessie, P.A., placed to be seen, yet no fingerprints, no smudges. This is no accident, nor a simple act of desperation. It is calculated. Sharp nodded, his expression one of grudging respect. You've a nose for this, Poirot. We'll get the coroner's report, but I'm betting you're right. Any thoughts on who? Not yet, Poirot replied, rising with a grace that belied his years. But the thefts, this murder, they are linked, like notes in a symphony. Jean Tomlinson, she knew something, saw something. We must learn what. The students were gathered in the common room, their faces pale under the harsh fluorescent light. Inspector Sharp took charge, his questions sharp and direct, while Poirot observed, his presence a quiet counterpoint to the inspector's authority. Celia admitted to a rivalry with Jean over a professor's favor, her voice breaking as she spoke. We argued sometimes, she said, twisting her handkerchief. She was so competitive, always trying to outdo me in class, but I'd never hurt her. Nigel, uncharacteristically subdued, claimed he'd been in his room studying, though his evasive glance suggested otherwise. I didn't hear anything, he muttered, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. I was reading, lost track of time. Valerie's alibi was vague, her cool demeanor fraying at the edges. I was out walking, she said, her fingers twisting a strand of her dark hair. I needed air. I didn't see Jean, I swear. Sally Finch, her usual warmth dimmed, said she'd been in the kitchen with Chandra and Akabumbo, preparing tea. We were laughing about some silly recipe, she said, her voice catching. Then we heard the scream. Chandra and Akibambo corroborated her story, their earnest nods lending weight to their words. Colin McNabb, however, was more reserved. His notebook clutched tightly. I was in the library, he said, his Scottish burr clipped, working on a paper. I didn't see Jean, but I heard her earlier, arguing with someone in the hall. Couldn't make out who. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. Arguing, Monsieur McNabb? This is most interesting. The voice? It was male or female? Colin hesitated, his eyes narrowing. Hard to say, it was muffled, but heated. Jean sounded angry, insistent. Sharp made a note, his pen scratching loudly in the tense silence. We'll need statements from everyone, he said. And no one leaves the hostel without my say-so. As the students dispersed, Poirot lingered in the garden, his eyes scanning the scene. The yew tree's branches cast eerie shadows, and the syringe, now bagged by Sharp's men, seemed to mock him with its clarity. He examined the ground, noting a faint scuff mark in the damp earth, as if someone had stood there, watching. A cigarette butt, half buried nearby, caught his attention. Nigel's brand, perhaps, but too common to be certain. Returning to the hostel, Poirot sought out Mrs. Nicoletis, who was pacing her office, her bangles clinking like a discordant chime. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice trembling, this is a catastrophe. A murder, in my house. The parents, the university, they will close me down. Calm yourself, Madame, Poirot said, his tone soothing yet firm. We shall find the truth, and your house will be restored. But I must know, did Mademoiselle Tomlinson have enemies? Did she speak of troubles, fears? Mrs. Nicolita shook her head, her dark eyes wide. Jean was serious, studious. She kept to herself, always with her books or her stethoscope. But she was sharp, always watching. Perhaps she saw too much. Poirot's mind seized on her words. Jean, the observer, the competitor, had she uncovered a secret worth killing for? He recalled the stolen items, their odd assortment, the rucksack, the scarf, the spectacles, the lipstick, the pen, the gloves, the stethoscope, and the ring. The stethoscope, Jean's own, was still missing, unlike the others that had been returned, altered, or damaged. Was it a clue or a distraction? He approached Inspector Sharp, who was overseeing the removal of Jean's body. Inspector Poirot said, his voice low, "The ring, it is the anomaly. Have it appraised, if you please. Its value, its origin, they may tell us more than Mademoiselle Austen reveals." Sharp nodded, his expression grim. "Already on it, Poirot. I've got a man checking with jewelers. If that ring's as valuable as you think, it could point to something bigger than a hostile squabble." Poirot returned to his quarters, the weight of the evening pressing on him. He sat at his small table, his tisane now cold, and opened his notebook. The thefts, he wrote, were a prelude, a smokescreen to obscure a greater crime. Jean's death was no impulsive act, but a calculated move, her knowledge a threat to the perpetrator. The syringe, so carefully placed, suggested medical knowledge hung herself, perhaps, or another with access to her supplies. Yet the cleanliness of the scene, the absence of struggle, pointed to someone she trusted, someone who could approach her unnoticed. As the clock in the hallway struck midnight, its chimes heavy and mournful, Poirot closed his eyes, the nursery rhyme echoing in his mind. Hickory Dickory Dock. The clock struck 1, the mouse ran down. The mouse, he thought, was no longer merely a thief, but a killer, and Poirot would not rest until it was caught. Chapter 5. The Diamond's Secret. The morning after Jean Tomlinson's death, Hickory House was shrouded in a silence as heavy as the fog that clung to London's streets. The students moved like specters, their usual chatter replaced by whispered fears and sidelong glances. Hercule Poirot, seated in the hostel's library, his polished cane resting against a chair, pored over his notebook with the intensity of a scholar deciphering an ancient text. The murder had sharpened his focus, transforming the petty thefts into a prelude to a far graver crime. The diamond ring, he sensed, was the pivot on which this mystery turned, its brilliance a beacon in the murk of deception. Inspector Sharp's call came at 10, his voice gruff over the hostel's crackling telephone. "Poirot, you were right about that ring," he said. "The jeweler says it's exceptional, a flawless diamond, heart-shaped, set in gold, worth at least £5,000. Not the sort of thing a student comes by easily." Poirot's mustache quivered, a sign of his mind racing. "Merci, Inspector. This ring, it is no mere heirloom. Its value suggests a purpose beyond sentiment. Have you traced its origin?" "Not yet," Sharp replied. "But we're checking records, jewelers, even auction houses. If it's stolen or smuggled, we'll find out," Bon Poirot said. "And the coroner's report? Morphine, as we thought, lethal dose, injected. No signs of a struggle, so she knew her killer or didn't expect the attack. We're testing the syringe for prints, but it's clean so far." Poirot thanked him and hung up, his thoughts swirling. Morphine, a drug accessible to a biology student like Jean, yet also to others with medical knowledge, perhaps Celia, the pharmacy student, or someone with connections beyond the hostel. The syringe's pristine condition gnawed at him. It was too deliberate, a prop in a carefully staged scene. He sought out Celia Austen, finding her in her room, a small space cluttered with textbooks and apothecary bottles. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her spectacles fogged with unshed tears. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, settling into a chair beside her desk, "the ring, it is time for truth. Its value, it is extraordinary. From whom did it come, and why do you guard this secret?" Celia's hands twisted in her lap, her voice barely audible. "It was a gift from Leonard Battison, a student who lived here last year. He studied geology, always talking about gems, mines. He said the ring was a family piece, but I wondered. He gave it to me just before he left, said he'd be back, but But he never wrote. Her voice broke, and she looked away, her fingers clutching a worn letter. Poirot's eyes narrowed. This Battison, he was close to you, oui? And his departure, it was sudden. She nodded, a tear escaping. He left without warning, right after exams. I thought he cared for me, but now, I'm not sure. The ring, it's all I have left. Of him. Poirot patted her hand, his touch light but reassuring. Courage, mademoiselle. You have helped more than you know. This Battison, he is a thread we must follow. Leaving Celia, Poirot reflected on the ring's significance. A diamond of such value, given so casually, suggested wealth or subterfuge. Was Battison a smuggler, using the hostel as a conduit? The thefts, he hypothesized, might be a cover. The ring's loss a misstep in a larger scheme. He turned his attention to the stolen items, many of which had reappeared, altered in curious ways. In the common room, he examined the returned objects, stored in a lost-and-found box under Mrs. Nicoletus's watchful eye. The rucksack Nigel's was worn but intact, its inner lining slightly torn. Valerie's scarf bore blue ink stains, as if deliberately marred. Chandra's spectacles had scratched lenses, rendering them useless. Colin's pen had a bent nib, and Akibombo's lipstick case was cracked, its contents intact but smudged. Only Jean's stethoscope and Sally's gloves remained missing. Alongside the ring, Poirot's fingers traced the scarf's stains, his mind conjuring possibilities. These alterations, he murmured, they are not accidents. They serve a purpose to distract, to conceal, or to signal. He recalled the ink smudge on the bulletin board, the chemical scent in the basement. Were the items used to carry something, messages, perhaps, or something more tangible? He sought out Valerie Hobhouse, whose cool elegance seemed at odds with the hostel's chaos. She was in the garden, sketching roses with a charcoal pencil, her movements precise but her eyes distant. Mademoiselle Hobhouse, Poirot said, approaching with a courteous nod, your scarf, it was returned, but ruined. Have you considered why someone would deface it? Valerie's hand paused, her gaze meeting his. I've no idea, monsieur. Poirot, she said, her voice smooth but guarded. It was a favorite, but I've others. I don't waste time on lost causes. Poirot smiled, undeterred by her reserve. And your movements, that evening in the library, can you recall more? Precisely, the timeline, it is vital. Her lips tightened, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. I told you, I was there, sketching, reading. I don't keep a diary of every moment. Yet precision, mademoiselle, it is the key to truth, Poirot replied, his tone mild but probing. He noted her expensive perfume, a floral note too, refined for a student's budget, and filed it away for later consideration. Next, he visited the basement, where the chemical scent lingered, faint but persistent. The laundry machines hummed, and a pile of linens sat unattended. But Poirot's attention was drawn to a corner where a dusty crate held old textbooks and broken furniture. He knelt, his gloved hand probing the shadows, and found a small vial, empty but bearing traces of a crystalline residue. He pocketed it carefully, resolving to have it analyzed. A solvent, perhaps, or something more illicit. That afternoon Poirot gathered the students in the common room, his presence commanding despite his diminutive stature. Miss Amos, he began, his voice clear and deliberate. The death of Mademoiselle Tomlinson has raised the stakes. The thefts, they are not mere pranks, but part of a design. I urge you to speak, to share any detail, however small. The truth it cannot hide. Forever? The room was tense, eyes darting suspiciously. Nigel shifted in his seat, his usual bravado muted. You're saying Jean's death is tied to the thefts? He asked, his voice sharp. That's mad. Who'd kill over a scarf or a pen? Not the items, Monsieur Chapman, Poirot replied, but what they represent. A secret, perhaps, that Mademoiselle Tomlinson uncovered. Sally Finch spoke up, her voice trembling but firm. Jean was nosy, always poking into things. She caught me once, reading a letter I didn't want shared. She didn't mean harm, but she noticed everything. Colin McNabb nodded, his notebook open. She was observant, too much for her own good. I saw her last week, checking the lost and found, muttering about something not being right. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And what, Monsieur McNabb, did she find? Colin shrugged, his expression guarded. She didn't say, just looked worried, like she'd seen something she shouldn't. As the meeting ended, Poirot's thoughts turned to Leonard Battison, a geology student, knowledgeable about gems. Leaving abruptly after giving Celia a diamond worth thousands, his role was no coincidence. Poirot requested Inspector Sharp to trace Betson's whereabouts, suspecting he had not vanished but was lurking in the shadows of this mystery. That evening, as the hostel settled into an uneasy quiet, Poirot stood by the grandfather clock, its steady tick-tock a reminder of time's relentless march. Hickory Dickory Dock, he thought. The mouse ran up the clock. But this mouse, he knew, was no mere thief. It was a predator, and Jean's death was its first strike. Poirot's little gray cells hummed, weaving connections between the ring, the thefts, and the murder, determined to unmask the killer before the clock struck again. Chapter 6. The hidden trail. The fog that had cloaked London for days began to lift, revealing a city sharp with the bite of early spring, but within Hickory House, the air remained thick with suspicion and secrets. Hercule Poirot, seated at a small desk in his temporary quarters, sipped a cup of café au lait, its warmth a small comfort against the chill of the mystery that consumed him. His notebook, now a labyrinth of precise annotations, lay open, each entry a clue to the intricate puzzle of thefts and murder. Jean Tomlinson's death had cast a long shadow, and the diamond ring, its origins tied to the elusive Leonard Battison, shimmered at the heart of Poirot's suspicions. The thefts, he was certain, were not mere caprices, but a carefully orchestrated distraction, concealing a purpose as dark as the yew tree under which Jean had died. Poirot's morning began with a visit from Miss Felicity Lemon, her satchel brimming with new findings. Her face, usually a mask of efficiency, bore a faint crease of concern as she handed him a dossier. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice crisp yet tinged with urgency, "I've cross-referenced the residents' backgrounds, as you requested. Most are unremarkable students with modest means, scholarships, or family support. But Leonard Battison, the former resident, is a ghost. No record of him at the university after last term, and his listed address is a vacant flat in Shoreditch." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with interest. "A ghost, you say, Miss Lemon? Yet he leaves behind a diamond of extraordinary value. This is no coincidence. Have you more?" Miss Lemon nodded, producing a telegram from Inspector Sharp. The yard traced Battison to a ship's manifesta freighter from Cape Town, docked 3 months ago. He traveled under an alias, Leonard Bailey. But the description matches Celia's account. Tall, dark-haired, mid-20s, with a scar on his left hand. "Formidable," Poirot murmured, his fingers steepled. "A man who vanishes, yet leaves a trail. We must find where it leads. Miss Lemon, contact the customs office. I wish to know if this Battison or Bailey has ties to any irregular activities at the port." As Miss Lemon departed, Poirot turned his attention to the hostels. Lay out a warren of corridors and staircases that seemed designed to harbor secrets. Hickory House stood a mere half-mile from London's docks, a proximity that stirred his suspicions. Smuggling, he mused, thrived in such places, goods and secrets slipping through the cracks of a bustling port. The thefts, with their peculiar mix of trivial and valuable items, suggested a scheme to move something unnoticed, perhaps hidden within the very objects stolen and returned. He began his day's investigation in the basement, where the faint chemical scent he had noted lingered, like a whisper of guilt. The space was dim, its concrete walls damp with the city's breath, and the hum of laundry machines provided a steady drone. Poirot examined the crate where he had found the vial, now safely with a chemist friend for analysis. The residue he suspected was linked to diamonds, perhaps a solvent used to clean or disguise them. He searched further, his gloved hands probing behind pipes and under shelves, until he found a scrap of paper, crumpled and yellowed, tucked beneath a loose floorboard. It bore a cryptic note: Docks, 3rd Pier, midnight. L.B. Poirot's pulse quickened. Leonard Battison, or someone using his initials, was connected to the port. Returning upstairs, he sought out Nigel Chapman, whose evasive demeanor and penchant for pranks made him a figure of interest. Nigel was in the common room, sprawled across a sofa, a chemistry textbook open but unread. His blond hair was disheveled, and his eyes, usually glinting with mischief, were shadowed with unease. "Monsieur Chapman," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "you have been most elusive about your movements. The evening of Mademoiselle Tomlinson's death, where were you precisely?" Nigel lit a cigarette, the flame trembling slightly. "I told the inspector. I was in my room, studying organic compounds, dull stuff. Why is everyone so keen to pin this on me?" Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "Because, monsieur, you are a man who enjoys games, yet this game has turned deadly. You received packages, perhaps for a friend. A certain Leonard Battison." Nigel's hand froze, the cigarette halfway to his lips. "Battison, never heard of him. I get books, lab supplies, that's all." His voice was too quick, his denial too sharp, and Poirot noted the bead of sweat on his brow. "Truth, monsieur, is a light that reveals all," Poirot said, rising. "If you hide it, it will find you." Next, he sought Valerie Hobos, whose guarded elegance intrigued him. She was in the library, her sketchbook open to a design of a sleek gown, her pencil moving with practiced grace. "Mademoiselle Hobos," Poirot began, settling opposite her, "you are a woman of taste, yet you live among students of modest means. Your perfume, it is costly, Nan. How does a student afford such luxuries?" Valerie's eyes flicked up, a spark of defiance in their depths. "I have a small inheritance," she said, her voice cool. "I spend it wisely." "Is that a crime?" "Not a crime, mademoiselle, but a curiosity," Poirot replied. "The scarf, the ink stains, were they a message, perhaps, or a cover for something else?" Valerie's pencil snapped, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but her fingers trembled as she reached for another. "It was just a scarf, ruined by some careless fool." Poirot smiled, his eyes never leaving her face. "Carelessness, mademoiselle, is not always the culprit. Sometimes it is intent." Leaving Valerie, Poirot returned to the garden, where Jean had met her end. The yew tree stood sentinel, its branches casting long shadows in the afternoon light. He examined the scuff mark he had noted, now joined by a faint imprint in the soile shoe, perhaps size 8, narrow. He scanned the area, finding a discarded matchstick, its tip blackened but unburned. Nigel smoked, but so did others. The clue was tantalizing, yet inconclusive. That afternoon, Inspector Sharp arrived with news from the customs office. "Poirot, you're onto something," he said, his voice low to avoid eavesdroppers. "Battison or Bailey was linked to a smuggling ring in cut diamonds coming through the docks from South Africa. Small shipments, hidden in everyday items. To avoid detection, the yard's raiding a warehouse tonight, based on a tip from one of Betson's known associates." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Magnifique, Inspector. This ring, it was no gift of love, but a tool of trade. And Hickory House, it is a way station, n'est-ce pas? The thefts, They distract from the movement of these diamonds. Sharp nodded, his face grim. Looks that way. Jean must have stumbled onto it, maybe saw something in the lost and found, or overheard a deal. We're checking her belongings for any notes, diaries, anything she might have written. Poirot's thoughts raced. The stolen items, rucksack, scarf, spectacles, pen, lipstick, could conceal small stones. Their return, a way to pass them along undetected. Jean's stethoscope, still missing, might have been used to smuggle a diamond, its tubing a perfect hiding place. Her death, then, was no random act, but a desperate measure to silence her. He gathered the students in the common room, his presence a quiet command. "Miss Amos," he said, his voice steady, "the tragedy of Mademoiselle Tomlinson was no accident. She saw what she should not, and it cost her life. I ask you now, who among you knew Leonard Battison? Speak, for silence protects the guilty." The room was still, the air thick with tension. Celia's face paled, but she said nothing, her eyes fixed on the floor. Nigel shifted, his cigarette burning low, while Valerie's hands stilled on her sketchbook. Sally whispered to Chandra, who shook his head, and Akibo Mo's usual smile was absent. Colin McNabb's pen scratched softly, his eyes darting between his peers. It was Sally who broke the silence. "I met Battison once," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Last year, at a lecture on mineralogy. He was intense, always talking about gems, their value. He left soon after, didn't say why." Poirot nodded, his mind weaving her words into the pattern. "Merci, Mademoiselle Finch. Every detail, it brings us closer." As the students dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze on the grandfather clock. Its chimes rang out, a solemn reminder of time's passage. Hickory Dickory Dock, he thought. The mouse ran up the clock. But the mouse was no longer hidden. It was Leonard Battison, or someone acting in his name, and Poirot was determined to trace the trail to its source before another life was lost. Chapter 7. The Smuggler's Game. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Hickory House, its feeble rays doing little to dispel the chill that had settled over the hostel since Jean Tomlinson's murder. Hercule Poirot stood in the narrow hallway, his polished cane tapping rhythmically against the worn parquet as he gazed at the grandfather clock. Its steady tick-tock, a metronome to his racing thoughts. The nursery rhyme, Hickory Dickory Dock, echoed in his mind, each chime a reminder that the mouse, now revealed as a figure far more dangerous than a petty thief, was still at large. The diamond ring, Leonard Battison, the peculiar thefts, and Jean's death were threads in a tapestry of crime, and Poirot's little gray cells were weaving them together with relentless precision. The morning had brought a breakthrough from Inspector Sharp, whose call arrived as Poirot savored his second café au lait. "We raided that warehouse last night," Sharp said, his voice crackling with suppressed excitement over the hostel's temperamental telephone. "Found a stash of uncut diamonds hidden in crates of machine parts, bound for Amsterdam." Betson. Name came up. Leonard Bailey, same alias. "He's in custody, but he's tight-lipped. Claims he's just a courier, but we're leaning on him." Poirot's mustache quivered, a sign of his mind seizing the news. Formidable, Inspector, and the method of smuggling. The diamonds, they were concealed in everyday items. "We spot on," Sharp replied. "Hollowed-out books, tool handles, even a pair of boots. Small enough to slip through customs, valuable enough to make it worth the risk. We're checking if any Hickory House residents are linked," Bon Poirot said. "I suspect this hostel is a hub. It's chaos, a perfect cover. Keep me informed, and please check for any connections to a chemical solvent, perhaps used to process or disguise the stones." Hanging up, Poirot turned to his notes, where the list of stolen items, rucksack, scarf, spectacles, pen, lipstick, stethoscope, gloves, and the diamond ring formed a pattern as intricate as a spider's web. The returned items, altered or damaged, suggested they had been used and discarded, their purpose fulfilled. The stethoscope, still missing, gnawed at him. Its medical tubing could conceal a small stone, and Jean's knowledge of it might have sealed her fate. The ring, given to Celia by Battison, was no token of affection but a link in the smuggling chain. Its theft, a miscalculation that had set this drama in motion. Poirot's first task was to confront Nigel Chapman, whose evasions and pranks made him a likely pawn in Betson's scheme. He found Nigel in the basement, sorting laundry with a sullen air, his usual bravado dimmed by the weight of recent events. The chemical scent lingered, sharper now, and Poirot's eyes scanned the room for its source, noting a stack of cleaning supplies in a corner. "Monsieur Chapman," Poirot began, his voice calm but piercing, "you have denied knowledge of Leonard Battison, yet I believe you have received packages for him, Nan. Books, perhaps, or laboratory supplies, delivered to this very hostile." Nigel's hand stilled, a damp shirt dangling from his fingers. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot," he said, his tone defiant but his eyes flickering with unease. "I get parcels sometimes. Study materials, chemicals for lab work. Nothing to do with your Battison." Poirot stepped closer, his gaze unyielding. "And these parcels, they arrive without question, without inspection. You are a chemist, monsieur. You know the scent in this room, a solvent, perhaps, used for diamonds. Tell me the truth, or the inspector's questions will be less gentle." Nigel's face paled, and he dropped the shirt, his hands trembling. "All right, look," he muttered, glancing at the door. "I got a few packages last term, addressed to me but marked for LB. I thought they were for a mate. Didn't ask questions. I left them in the common room, and they were gone the next day. That's all I know, I swear." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you never met this LB? Never suspected?" Nigel shook his head, but his avoidance of Poirot's gaze spoke volumes. "I'm not in on anything dodgy. I just needed the extra cash. Times are tight." "Money, monsieur, is a dangerous lure," Poirot said, his voice soft but stern. "If you know more, speak now, before the net tightens." Nigel said nothing, his jaw set, and Poirot left him, his mind cataloguing the admission. Nigel was a courier, unwitting or not, but his role was peripheral. The true orchestrator was Battison, and Poirot needed to know how deeply the hostel was entangled. Next, he sought Valerie Hobos, whose costly perfume and vague alibis suggested a connection to wealth beyond her means. He found her in the library, her sketchbook closed, her dark eyes fixed on the rain-streaked window. "Mademoiselle Hobos," Poirot said, settling into a chair with deliberate grace, "you have been most reticent. The parcels Nigel received, did you, perhaps, deliver them further? A small task, for a small reward." Valerie's posture stiffened, her fingers tightening on the armrest. "I don't know what you're implying," she said, her voice icy. "I'm a student, not an errant girl." "Yet your lifestyle, it is." Elevated, Poirot pressed, his tone gentle but relentless. "Your perfume, your clothes, they suggest a source of funds. A friend, perhaps, who pays for services rendered." Her eyes flashed, a crack in her composure. "I told you, I have an inheritance. And yes, I've run errands picking up packages, dropping them off at the post. It's not a crime. I didn't know what was in them." Poirot leaned forward, his voice a velvet blade. "And if those packages contained diamonds, mademoiselle, diamonds worth killing for?" Valerie's breath caught, her hand rising to her throat. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, I didn't. I just took the money." Poirot nodded, sensing truth in her fear. "Mercy, mademoiselle. But beware, ignorance is no shield when murder is the game." Leaving Valerie shaken, Poirot pieced together the scheme. Battison, or his associates, used Hickory House as a way station, hiding diamonds and stolen items to move them through the hostel undetected. The rucksack's torn lining, the spectacles, scratched frames, the pen's bent nib, the lipstick's cracked KCH could conceal a stone, passed along and returned to obscure the trail. Jean's stethoscope, still missing, was likely a key vessel, and her discovery of a diamond within. It had cost her life. The ring, given to Celia, was a mistake. Its theft, an attempt to recover a valuable left in play too long. He requested a meeting with Inspector Sharp, who arrived at the hostel with a folder of new evidence. "Betson's talking, but not much," Sharp said, spreading documents on Mrs. Nicoletus's desk. "He admits to passing diamonds through London, says he used students as couriers, thought they'd be less suspicious. Claims he didn't kill Jean, says he was out of the country when it happened." Poirot's eyes scanned the papers, a list of Betson's known contacts. None residents of Hickory House, but one address stood out: a dockside tavern, a stone's throw from the third pier mentioned in the basement note. "This tavern," Poirot said, tapping the page, "it is a meeting place. We must watch it, Inspector." Sharp agreed, dispatching a plainclothes officer to stake out the location. "If Betson's telling the truth, someone else at Hickory House is pulling strings," he said. "Any guesses?" Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind weaving connections. "Not yet, Inspector, but the killer is close, someone who knew Jean's habits, her suspicions. The syringe, it was no random choice. It points to medical knowledge, or access to Jean's supplies." That evening, Poirot revisited the garden, the yew tree looming like a silent witness. He examined the soil again, finding a second matchstick, identical to the first, its tip unburned. A habit, perhaps, of someone nervous, someone watching. He pocketed it, his thoughts turning to Colin McNab, whose sharp observations and psychology studies made him a keen observer of human behavior. Could he have seen more than he admitted? As night fell, Poirot stood by the grandfather clock, its chimes marking the hour with solemn precision. Hickory Dickory Dock, he thought. The clock struck 1, the mouse ran down. The mouse was cornered, its trail leading to the docks, but the killer remained in the shadows, and Poirot vowed to drag them into the light before the clock struck again. Chapter 8. The mouse revealed. The twilight of Hickory House was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth, the hostel's walls seeming to close in as the mystery reached its crescendo. Hercule Poirot stood in the common room, the flickering light of a single lamp casting long shadows across the faces of the assembled students. The grandfather clock in the hallway loomed like a silent judge, its steady tick-tock a reminder that time was running out for the mouse that had scurried through this house of secrets. Jean Tomlinson's murder, the thefts, the diamond ring, and Leonard Betson's smuggling ring had woven a web of deceit, and Poirot's little gray cells were poised to unravel it. The students sat in a tense semicircle, their eyes reflecting a mix of fear, suspicion, and exhaustion. Celia Austin clutched a handkerchief, her spectacles glinting with unshed tears. Nigel Chapman slouched in his chair, his usual bravado replaced by a wary stillness. Valerie Hobus's elegant poise was strained, her fingers twisting a pencil. Sally Finch's warmth was dimmed, her red hair tucked behind her ears as she watched Poirot intently. Chandra Lal adjusted his spectacles nervously, while Akibo Mo's cheerful demeanor was absent, his hands folded tightly. Colin McNab's sharp gaze darted between his peers, his notebook open but untouched, as if he sensed the climax of this grim drama. Poirot cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the silence with the clarity of a bell. "Ms. Amos," he began, his Belgian accent lending weight to each word. "A crime has been committed under this roof, not merely of theft, but of murder and deceit. The mouse that ran up the clock was no petty thief, but a smuggler of diamonds, and Jean Tomlinson paid the ultimate price for her discovery." He paced slowly, his polished cane tapping the floor, his eyes sweeping the room. "Let us begin. With the thefts, a rucksack, a scarf, spectacles, a pen, a lipstick, gloves, a stethoscope, and a diamond ring, items trivial and valuable, stolen, and in many cases, returned, but altered. Why? Because they were vessels, mesdames et messieurs, for uncut diamonds, smuggled through this hostel to the docks of London. A gasp rippled through the room. Celia's hand flew to her mouth, and Nigel's cigarette trembled in his fingers. Poirot continued, undeterred. The rucksack's lining concealed stones. The spectacles' frames held them in hollowed compartments. The pen's barrel was a perfect hiding place. The lipstick, the scarf, even these were used, their damage a sign of their purpose fulfilled. Jean's stethoscope, still missing, was likely the final vessel, its tubing ideal for a small but valuable cargo. He turned to Nigel, whose face had paled. Monsieur Chapman, you admitted to receiving packages for L.B. Leonard Battison, a geology student who vanished last year, leaving behind a diamond ring worth thousands. You were a courier, unwitting or not, passing these items to others. In the chain, Nigel's voice was hoarse. I didn't know what was in them, he protested, his eyes darting to the others. I thought it was just books, supplies. I needed the money, that's all. Poirot's gaze shifted to Valerie, whose composure cracked under his scrutiny. And you, Mademoiselle Hobhouse, you delivered these parcels, to a tavern by the docks, perhaps for a reward that funded your elegant tastes. Valerie's lips parted, her breath shallow. Ah yes, I took packages, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I didn't ask questions. I didn't know. About diamonds, or Zhang I, swear it. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Ignorance, it is a fragile defense. But the true crime lies with the one who orchestrated this scheme. Leonard Battison, now in custody, but not alone in his guilt. He turned to Celia, whose tears spilled over. Mademoiselle Austen, your ring was no gift of love, but a tool of Betson's trade, left in your care by mistake. Its theft was an attempt to reclaim it, but Jean Tomlinson, with her sharp eyes and sharper mind, uncovered the truth. She found a diamond, perhaps in her own stethoscope, and confronted the wrong person. Sally Finch's voice broke the silence, trembling but firm. You're saying Jean was killed because she knew about the smuggling? Precisement, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. Jean was observant, competitive, always watching. She saw something in the lost and found, or overheard a conversation, and it cost her life. The syringe, filled with morphine, was no accident. It was a weapon chosen to silence her, placed to suggest a medical mishap. Inspector Sharp, standing at the room's edge, stepped forward, his weathered face grim. We've got Battison, he said, and his contacts are singing. The diamonds moved through Hickory House, hidden in stolen items to avoid suspicion. Jean's death was a panic move. Someone here acted to protect the operation. Poirot's gaze settled on Colin McNab, whose pen had stilled, his blue eyes narrowed. Monsieur McNab, Poirot said, you are a student of the mind, always observing, always noting. You heard Jean arguing, saw her unease. Did you see more? Did you know her killer? Colin's jaw tightened, his voice low. I told you. I heard her arguing, but I didn't see who. She was poking around, asking questions about the lost and found. I warned her to mind her own business, but she wouldn't listen. Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind seizing on a discrepancy. And yet, monsieur, you are too precise, too watchful, to miss the truth. The matchsticks in the garden, near Jean's body, they are yours, are they not? A nervous habit, discarded but unburned, marking your presence. Colin's face drained of color, his notebook slipping to the floor. I was in the garden that night, he admitted, his voice shaking. I followed Jean, wanted to know what she was up to. She was meeting someone, whispering about the stethoscope. I didn't kill her, I swear. I left before anything happened. Poirot's eyes bored into him. But you saw, monsieur, you saw the killer, or you know who it was. Speak, or the silence will condemn you. Colin's shoulders slumped, his voice barely a whisper. It was Valerie, he said, his words slicing through the room's tension. I saw her with Jean, near the yew tree. They were arguing, and Valerie had something in her hand, a syringe, I think. I didn't stay, I didn't want to know. Valerie's cry was sharp, her composure shattered. That's a lie, she screamed, rising from her chair. I wasn't there. I was walking, I told you. Sharp moved swiftly, his hand on her arm. Easy, Miss Hobhouse, he said. We'll sort this out at the station. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. Un moment, Inspector. Mademoiselle Hobhouse, you delivered parcels, yes, but you knew more than you admitted. Jean confronted you, did she not? She found a diamond in her stethoscope, realized it was part of a smuggling ring, and threatened to expose you. Valerie's eyes were wild, her voice breaking. I didn't kill her. Yes, I knew about the diamonds. Battison paid me to move them, said it was harmless. Jean found out, started asking questions, but I didn't touch her. I begged her to stay quiet, but she wouldn't listen. Poirot's gaze softened, sensing truth amid her panic. Then who, mademoiselle, who silenced her? Valerie's tears spilled over, her voice a whisper. I don't know. I swear, I don't know. Poirot turned to the group, his voice resolute. The killer is among us, mes amis, but the net closes. Betson's scheme is broken, his diamonds seized. The truth will not hide forever. As Sharp led Valerie away for questioning, the students dispersed, their faces etched with shock. Poirot lingered, his eyes on the clock as it chimed 9, its notes heavy with finality. Hickory Dickory Dock, he thought, the mouse ran down. The mouse was revealed, but the killer remained a shadow, and Poirot vowed to bring them to light before the clock struck again. Chapter 9. The final chime. The morning after the dramatic confrontation in the common room. Hickory House lay under a pall of uneasy calm, as if the very walls held their breath. The revelation of Leonard Betson's smuggling ring, and Valerie Hobhouse's reluctant admission had shaken the residents. Yet the shadow of Jean Tomlinson's killer lingered, a spectre that Hercule Poirot was determined to banish. He stood in his temporary quarters, his small frame silhouetted against the window, where the first rays of sunlight pierced the lingering mist. His notebook, now a dense chronicle of clues and confessions, lay open, its pages a testament to the relentless work of his little gray cells. The grandfather clock in the hallway, ever present, chimed 8. Its notes a solemn reminder that time was both ally and adversary in this quest for truth. Poirot's thoughts were a whirl of connections. The diamond ring, a smuggler's misstep. The stolen items, vessels for uncut stones. Jean's murder, a desperate act to silence her discovery. Valerie's tearful confession had confirmed her role as a courier. But her denial of the murder rang true, her fear too raw to be feigned. Colin McNabb's accusation, however, pointed to a deeper truth, one that Poirot sensed was hidden in the interplay of motives and opportunities among the residents. He began the day with a call to Inspector Sharp, whose gruff voice carried the weariness of a sleepless night. Poirot, we've got Valerie at the station, Sharp said. She's sticking to her story, admits to moving parcels for Battison, but swears she didn't touch Jean. We've no hard evidence to hold her for murder, just circumstantial links to the smuggling. Betson's still clamming up, but his associates confirmed the hostel was a drop point. Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind seizing on a detail. Inspector, the syringe of your tests revealed anything new? And the stethoscope, Jean's missing item, has it surfaced? No prints on the syringe, Sharp replied. To clean, as you said. The stethoscope's still missing, but we found traces of morphine in Jean's room, in a locked case. Either she was careless, or someone had access. Access, Poirot murmured. That is the key, Inspector. Someone close, someone trusted. I shall need to see Jean's room again, and please, keep watch on the tavern by the docks. The killer may yet make a move. Hanging up, Poirot made his way to Jean's room, a Spartan space with a narrow bed, a desk piled with biology texts, and a faint scent of antiseptic. The locked case Sharp mentioned was open now, its contents vials, syringes, and medical tools scattered by the police search. Poirot examined the lock, noting faint scratches, similar to those on Celia's drawer. A skilled hand, he thought, or someone with a key. Jean's meticulous nature suggested she would not leave such a case unsecured. Pointing to an intruder who knew her habits, he searched the room, his gloved hands probing under the mattress, behind the mirror, inside the desk drawers. Tucked in a textbook, he found a folded note, its ink smudged but legible. Meet me, Garden. 8 p.m. We need to talk about the stethoscope. C. Poirot's pulse quickened. C could be Celia, Colin, or Chandra, but the note's secrecy suggested a confrontation, one that had led to Jean's death. He sought out Celia Austen first. Finding her in the library, her face pale and drawn. Mademoiselle, Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm, you knew Jean well. Did she confide in you about the stethoscope, or perhaps a meeting in the garden? Celia's eyes widened, her hands twisting her handkerchief. No, she didn't say anything, she whispered. We weren't close, not really. She was always so intense, always watching. I told you about our rivalry, but it was just school stuff, nothing serious. Poirot held up the note, watching her reaction. This C, Mademoiselle, it is you, perhaps. You wrote to Jean, asked her to meet. Celia's breath caught, her face crumpling. No, that's not my writing. I swear, I didn't write it. I was in my room that night, studying. Poirot nodded, sensing truth in her panic but noting the note's significance. He next sought Colin McNab, whose psychological insight and garden sighting made him a pivotal figure. Colin was in the common room, his notebook open, his pen scratching furiously. Monsieur McNab, Poirot said, settling opposite him, you saw Valerie with Jean, you said. But this note, signed C, suggests another hand. Your hand, perhaps. Colin's pen stilled, his blue eyes sharp with defiance. I didn't write any note, he said, his Scottish burr clipped. I told you what I saw Valerie with. Jean arguing. I don't know about any stethoscope, but Jean was obsessed with the lost and found. Kept saying something was wrong. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And the matchsticks, monsieur, in the garden yours. You were there, watching, yet you claim innocence. What did you truly see? Colin's jaw tightened, his voice low. I saw Valerie, like I said. But there was someone else, in the shadows, near the gate. I couldn't see who, just a figure, moving fast. I didn't stay, I didn't want to get involved. Poirot's mind raced. A third figure, unseen but present, shifted the puzzle's pieces. He thanked Colin and moved to Chandra Lal, whose quiet demeanor and scratched spectacles suggested a peripheral role but keen observation. Chandra was in the garden, reading under the yew tree, its branches a grim reminder of Jean's fate. Monsieur Lal, Poirot said, you are a mathematician, a man of logic. Did Jean speak to you of her suspicions, or did you see her in the garden that night? Chandra adjusted his spectacles, his voice soft. Jean was curious, always asking questions. She spoke to me once, about the stethoscope, said it felt heavier, like something was inside. I told her to tell Mrs. Nicolaides, but she wanted proof. I wasn't in the garden that night. Was with Akibumbo, playing chess. Poirot nodded, filing away the detail of the stethoscope's weight. Jean had suspected a diamond, he was certain, and her insistence on proof had led to her doom. He returned to the common room, where Sally Finch and Akibumbo sat, their conversation hushed. Mademoiselle Finch, Monsieur Akibumbo, Poirot said. You were together the night of Jean's death. Did you hear anything, see anything, that might point to her killer? Sally shook her head, her red hair catching the light. We were in the kitchen, like I said. We heard the scream, but nothing before. Jean was so serious, always digging into things. I wish I'd paid more attention. Akibumbo nodded, his usual cheer subdued. Jean was kind, but quiet. She did not talk to me much, but I saw her once, checking the lost and found, looking worried. Poirot's thoughts crystallized. Jean's discovery of a diamond in her stethoscope had threatened the smuggling ring, and someone, perhaps the shadowy figure Colin saw, had acted to silence her. The note, signed C, was a lure, drawing Jean to the garden under false pretenses. But whose hand had penned it? That evening, Sharp returned with news from the dockside tavern. We caught a man, a fence for Betson's ring, he said, his voice low in Mrs. Nicoletus's office. He named Valerie as a courier, but swears she didn't kill Jean, said another figure. Someone higher up was calling shots from within. The hostel, no name, but they're scared, Poirot. Whoever it is, they're ruthless. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then we are close, Inspector. The killer is here, among us, and the note, it is the final clue. I shall gather the residents once more, and the truth will ring out like the chime of the clock. As night fell, Poirot stood by the grandfather clock, its final chime echoing through the silent hostel. Hickory Dickory Dock, he thought. The clock struck 1, the mouse ran down. The mouse was caught, the smuggling ring exposed, but the killer's shadow remained, and Poirot's resolve burned brighter than ever to bring them into the light.